I bet you thought you knew the most important features in modern day cars. I did too, until now. I've been researching the purchase of a brand new vehicle. Now I've come up with a list of the best, most important features you're going to want to include in your next new car buying experience. So let's get into it now.
Life's too short to drive boring cars.
The first thing you have to consider are the transmissions that are in that vehicle when equipped. There's some that you want to have and there's others you absolutely want to avoid. Well, when you look at a car like this, most vehicles have an automatic transmission nowadays, or a double clutch, an ECVT, or a CVT transmission. There's many different choices, and either way, they're what transfers the power from the engine to the wheels, whether it's front wheel, rear wheel, or all-wheel drive. So the transmission is one of the most important and expensive components within your vehicle. Let's get to the chase. Let's go. We spoke in other videos how the CVT transmission, for example, like Jatco you get with Nissan products and many others, are poorly made. Their belts, their pulleys, they're highly unreliable and often need many of thousands of dollars repair costs or replacement costs down the road. They just are too finicky. Now the ECVT, which is a product you'll often find in Toyotas and Lexus products, are really more of a set of planetary gears and often coupled up to a hybrid system, and they're actually not to be confused. They're a strict, sturdy set of robust gears, and they often will outlast the engine in many cases. You can get hundreds of thousands of miles on those systems, and they're very durable. Now, they're not the most exciting, but honestly, if I can offer advice, the double clutch or the dual clutch gearbox is also a highly entertaining vehicle and transmission to utilize, but it comes at a cost. Maintenance, servicing, and if you ever have to repair or replace one, it's going to cost you a significant amount of money. So that's why what I say with automatic transmissions being the first choice in modern day vehicles. A conventional automatic transmission that has an old school stock that has the R and D on it, for example, or often you'll find it in the center console, R and D, and that's a very simple system. Usually those consist of more of a mechanical setup. What you don't want to see in a lot of products, and you're seeing nowadays more, you're seeing in Jeep products, you're seeing in Jaguar, Land Rover, or you're seeing more of a rotary knob system, which is all electronic and all digital. In some cases, they pop out of the dashboard, and those are very prone to failure. So if you want to keep it simple, you either go with a manual gearbox, the 3-pedal system, of course, or you also go with the torque converter automatic transmission with a more conventional shift system that is more mechanical rather than electronic, and you're sure to have a system that's likely going to last a long time. The next modern piece of technology, which you literally can't live without, once you own it, once you drive it, and once you use it, you'll realize, what have I done all these years without it? And a lot of it has to do with cameras. Here, this vehicle is equipped with a backup camera on the back. There's all sorts of sensors all the way around these vehicles, and be a combination of sensors and cameras that you also find cameras and sensors at the front. You're able to portray a 360-degree view of this vehicle, both the front or the back, or all the way around. It offers a very clear view of what's around you, protects people around you, whether it's pets, poles, posts, curbs. You don't want to damage your expensive vehicle, your expensive wheels and body parts, and most importantly, you don't want to hurt people. So having these cameras on board that work seamlessly are an absolute godsend, and you definitely can't do without it. For example, when you put your vehicle in reverse, you all of a sudden get these wonderful 360-degree views. When you look at this camera view right there and you put the vehicle in reverse, now you're able to navigate between the overhead 360 as well as what's here, and they usually draw you the lines, but it absolutely gives you a very clear view and perspective of what you're driving up against, and so you don't have an incident or maybe damage the vehicle. That 360-degree view is absolutely wonderful, and it keeps you from bumping into anything. The other thing is you can also change the view. And often with the push of another button, for example, like this, you can now get yourself a view of the front of the vehicle too. You still get your 360-degree view. It shows you how you're turning, the direction you're going to go, and the trajectory, but you're also getting this view as well, and you're seeing right down in front of the vehicle. In case if there's a toy or a pet or something like that, you're able to check your entire surroundings and eliminate any potential pitfalls of hitting anything that you don't want. The only downside with these 360 cameras are there's parts on board. If you ever damage them, it's going to cost a little money. If you're an fender bender or have to repair a part, it's going to cost a little bit more money. Rarely do these parts fail. They're built of commercial grade components and they're quite reliable. But that's the only downfall, is if you have to change parts, there is an additional cost. The third modern technology, which you probably want to avoid, but more importantly, the ones that you want to look for because they're harder and harder to find, has to do with what's under the hood right here. This one here is a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, makes about 250 horsepower. But the reality is a lot of the outgoing models were V6s, naturally aspirated. Toyotas were making V8s, V6s, and 4-cylinder engines that lacked turbocharging. They were reliable and they lasted a long time, but that's the reality with a lot of modern day vehicles now. They're being switched out, and a lot of these car companies now are creating engines and drivetrains for the sake of economy, environment, EPA standards, and everybody's pushing manufacturers to build smaller, more cost-effective vehicles, as well as certainly vehicles that use less fuel. The EPA loves it, and so do the governments. But these 2-liter turbocharged engines that you're finding in almost every single manufacturer seems to be the common ingredient. It's smaller turbocharged 4-cylinder engines. I even recently drove the latest brand new Volkswagen Atlas, and they've swapped out the V6 with now a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. So it's a very difficult thing now to find an older school naturally aspirated engine, which is what you want. If you can find it, that's the technology and that's the feature that you want in your modern day vehicle. I'll give you some examples. Acura MDX, you can still find a naturally aspirated V6, as well as a Honda Pilot and the Passport, still find the naturally aspirated V6s. We can even find in the Nissan, the new Frontier pickup trucks, 3.8 liter V6. There are a few around. Even Toyota still has a few of the 3.5-liter V6 naturally aspirated engines around, as well as their infamously reliable 2.5-liter 4-cylinder that they often couple up with a lot of their hybrid systems. There are still some naturally aspirated engines around, including Mazda's 2.5-liter naturally aspirated 4-cylinder. I could go on. A lot of these vehicles are becoming more prevalent with the turbocharging that you'll find buried down in here. With that, you get extra heat, you get extra wear and tear, lots of plastic under the hood. Doesn't do it any good. There's extra components, extra packaging, making access and repair costs higher, as well as oral servicing more important than it ever has been. And so if you can find yourself a naturally aspirated engine, which is becoming much harder to find, that is a keeper, and you definitely should buy one. This is the next feature right there. We're talking about heated seats. Heated seats is another very important feature that a lot of people love these days. I can't live without it. We live in the frozen north. If you live in Canada, northern United States, even Eastern Europe, Western Europe, there's parts that get real winter time. You get snow and you get sub-zero temperatures. So getting into a vehicle early in the morning, heading off to work, when it's minus 10 outside, get inside here and the seats are hard as rock. It's not very comfortable and it's very inconvenient. Also, to have a steering wheel here that's heated, because that's the point of contact. That's what you're touching when you're heading off to the races. And this, unfortunately, is also as cold as it is outside. So sure, while you can wear gloves, you can put gloves on here and hold the steering wheel, and certainly you can wear extra clothing. Driving on a leather seat, holding onto a leather steering wheel is extremely uncomfortable. And when you get into the colder temperatures, I'll tell you, heated seats and steering wheels are one of the biggest godsends that I've ever seen driving in the colder northern Arctic type temperatures. I definitely can't do without, and I would highly recommend, unless you're living in places like Southern California or Florida, then it doesn't matter. But just about everywhere else could definitely use this technology, and I love it. Another feature in a lot of modern day vehicles seems to be going away by the dodo bird. When you pop the trunk like this, often nowadays you won't find anything under this storage capacity but a bunch of extra parts. You might find an inflator kit for a tire or a roadside repair kit buried under there, but rarely nowadays do you find vehicles with full-size spares that you can throw right on side, because now a lot of manufacturers now are going with run flat tires, which works great if you want to drive that to the next repair shop and it adds a certain layer of convenience. But run flat tires can often cost 2-3 times as much as a standard conventional tire. Not to mention those inflatable kits that you put in the trunk, often that a lot of manufacturers are replacing with spares, often don't work that great either, and it gives you even less of a likeliness of getting to the next repair shop. Often the best course of action is having a vehicle that comes spec'd with conventional tires non-run flats. And if you need to have that spare tire in the back because your vehicle does not come equipped, then I would consider buying, you can find on Amazon or online, spare backup sets that you can either put down in the trunk, maybe rework some of that space underneath, or just chuck it in the back just for that added convenience, because the cost differential to have a run flat over a conventional tire is absolutely astronomical. Not to mention, if you pick up a nail with a run flat tire, and a lot of times with the all-wheel drive vehicles, these tire manufacturers say that you have to change the entire set, which could cost you thousands if you had a nail in your tire. So the best course of action is to find a vehicle that either has a spare tire from factory, or set yourself up with the vehicle that has conventional tires and put an aftermarket spare in the trunk. Another form of modern technology which I absolutely love. Have you ever made the go of make a lane change and all of a sudden, oh, you look over and you almost ran over somebody that was in the lane beside you? It's happened to all of us. That's why this modern technology called the blind spot detection system, you often see little lights down here that illuminate. If you go to make a move, signal you with your signal light, and you start to move, transition over to the other lane, if there's a car in your blind spot, then often this light down here will illuminate. You also get an audible sound inside the vehicle as well, which gives you that extra add-on, an extra layer of protection to remind you, oh, hang on. So before you make that costly mistake changing lanes and run into somebody inadvertently, the lane change detection program is one of the best technologies and clearly helps you avoid some of the worst mistakes on the road. Another modern feature that I find myself personally more of a convenience but really don't want to live without anymore is the panoramic sunroof, as we see right here. Now, I get it. It's not that important from a safety perspective, nor even from a convenience perspective. But the reality is that having that panoramic sunroof actually does wonders for the overall interior feel of the vehicle. And as you slide into a vehicle nowadays, and you look out in here, you feel this whole open air space, this ambiance, and it really brightens it up. I mean, you get into a vehicle that was 25 years old and it feels very Spartan and dark and basic, and it's just this overall feel of having this extra light come in there, and it absolutely does wonders for your peace of mind and mental health. I find that it just brightens up my day, makes me feel good when I go for a drive, and I have this big open air space above me here just illuminating the interior. It just feels so nice, so right. And if I can get myself a vehicle with at least the sunroof, but more importantly, even a panoramic glass, yes, granted, it can be a costly option. Yes, if it gets damaged, it's very costly. But honestly, with insurance coverage these days, it's a mere checking of the box. It's not a huge add-on. And quite frankly, when I buy a vehicle with panoramic sunroof, I usually cover it with a little bit of paint protection film so that if a rock should hit it, it's far less likely to shatter. Honestly, panoramic sunroof, and yes, there's been stories of them blowing out, but those stories are very few and far between. A must-have, even from a mental health perspective, on any modern day vehicle. So another feature that you have to have in modern day vehicles, we know with this transition to everybody's going with big screens and large screens and touch screens everywhere on almost every single manufacturer. Even Volkswagen customers have recognized that there's too much tech going on, and a lot of customers just want a simple knob and button to press. That's why in modern day vehicles, to find vehicles that actually have very simple controls is very hard to find, especially if you heater controls. These are the most important parts that you want quick access to. So when you're driving down the road and you're minding your business, but you want to make that quick adjustment, the last thing you want is the extra distraction and having to search around and go through a bunch of menus and knobs and press knobs and buttons to actually scroll through your screen and find that feature. The best thing to have are the commonly used features like heaters and stereo controls, like you're seeing down here, where you can adjust your temperature, the ups and downs, the fan speed, automatic. You can do all of that with the press of a button right there. And even your CD player right here, which is kind of dates this vehicle, but you have quick access to your navigation, radio, and media, as well as on the steering wheel, some easy to touch buttons that you can feel they're very engaging right there. And that helps you. Having actual knobs and buttons goes a long ways to the driving experience. And with all this modern day technology with touchscreens all over the place, it just takes away, it distracts, and it makes it more confusing to the point where I know I personally don't even like using half the features that are buried within menus within menus. So if I have a vehicle or can get a vehicle that is much simpler to use, Count me in. And before we get to the last one, which is absolutely massive and you'll find it under the hood, we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the second last one, and that is cloud and subscription-based features in a lot of modern day vehicles. And BMW has really started a trend that is absolutely horrific. The worst part is, with a lot of those vehicles, for example, BMWs, they'll have all the wiring, they'll have the technology, they'll have the modules under the seats, they'll have the modules under the dash, they'll have all the wiring in place, but those features won't work. Even if you press the button, it won't work because you have to log in, you have to pay a subscription fee just to enable heated seats, navigation, and certain other types of features that might be safety related or convenience related. And that's the worst part. If vehicles that are selling you on a cloud-based subscription or any kind of subscription fee, I personally would stay away from vehicles that have those types of scenarios because it kind of locks you in for the long term. And while it feels like a positive win for the manufacturers, from a consumer's standpoint, all it does is upset the customers. Have you heard Volvo has now retracted? They were going subscription-based fees, and even they recognized the writing on the wall. It chased customers away. That's why if I came across a vehicle that had features with a heavy basis in subscription fees, I'm not walking away. I'm running away. Now, a modern day feature that you're finding in less and less and less of these vehicles, and it may not necessarily be an entire deal breaker, but for a DIYer like myself, or somebody that likes to do a little bit more of a health check on my vehicles, this is a feature that's going away on the vast majority of internal combustion vehicles out there on the market today. Let's look under the hood right here. So basically, flip up the hood and let me demonstrate what we're talking about here. Now, you look at under the hoods of most modern day vehicles, it's a lot of confusing plastics and wires and hoses and pieces that you don't know a lot about. But one thing you do know about is when you see these yellow symbols or logos, or you see caution, or you see these, or you see these, those all tell you something. But this right here is your modern day oil dipstick, which is harder to come by these days, and many manufacturers are totally eliminating that functionality. In other words, they're putting a programmable gauge on your dash that you have to wait after you turn the car off. You have to wait another 10 or 15 minutes, turn the car on, check it, and then it recalibrates. I don't personally like that. It's a time waster. I always find myself having to go out, having to come back in to check the oil. Not to mention, you're not able to sample the oil to see what kind of condition it's in. You're basically having to just look at the level on the gauge, and you have to wait, and it's very inconvenient. And you're also putting faith in that technology that is reading accurately. I personally like the use of an old school dipstick, like in this Mercedes-Benz, and you can't find these in modern day BMWs, for example, or Porsches. A lot of vehicles take that functionality away from the buyer, the owner, and give it to the computer instead. But I personally like to be able to grab that hold of that dipstick, pull it out, and check the oil level. But you can also give it a sniff and a smell and tell whether the oil's in good shape, if there's any froth on there. And it doesn't just give you a level, but it kind of gives you an indication as to the condition. Do you smell excess fuel in there? Do you see froth? Might indication you might actually have some coolant in there, possibly blown head gasket or some other condition. It can tell you a lot about the health of your engine, but we can't do that with modern technology, and you rely heavily on the service bay and the service department to give you that information. Otherwise, all you can see is the level on the dash, and that's all you're getting. So that's a technology and a feature which is a huge selling point for me and for anybody if they care about their vehicle. And with all of that said, be sure to check out that video. Those are the worst features you're going to want to avoid like the plague when buying your new vehicle. New vehicle features you just don't want. Hope to see each and every one on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.